So in general, judge training. When we think about judge training, you may be asking yourself if you're starting or if you've got new people involved in the role, either as a chief judge or head judge or whatever it is you want to call it. Why are you involved in providing judge training? What is the general purpose for this? And often it's to provide a general expectation for judges. So, what is it that they're going to be expected to do day of? If there's any, prep or reading or, project proposals in advance that you're asking them to review or rubrics to become familiar with, it's a good information, a good reminder for our judges what it is that we're expecting them to do and what their responsibilities are as well. Judge training also is the time when you can provide the general ethos around the judging at the science fair. We're here to support our students. We're here to provide feedback to help them, think more critically about their projects, to really engage in that scientific method, to have fun in STEM, and to, recognize, ways in which we can incorporate alternative perspectives or new forms of data analysis or other aspects when we think about, STEM fairs as a whole. But it is often important to bring in those reminders about the fact that these are youth who are learning and growing and exploring. And so, what is the ethos that your region is wanting to bring forward in terms of that support and that space to provide that constructive yet supportive feedback to the youth that are engaged in the STEM fairs? It also provides general information around timelines, expectations, how the reviewing of projects are going to go. So, what's the schedule for the day? What are some key tips or strategies for providing general feedback and supporting students? So, lots of different pieces of information that can be shared during judge training. And your region may decide to share it in different forms. Maybe some of it's through an email, maybe some of it's through asynchronous materials like pre recorded videos or handouts that judges can review. And maybe it's during the day of as well, when at the beginning of the fair, the day before the fair, offer a judge training in person or Zoom or team session to answer any questions and to go over the general key steps and strategies as you move forward. But how do you conduct these judge training sessions? Really, up to you, up to your region, and how what kind of works best. Can be online, can be in person, can be blended, asynchronous. Again, you kind of pick that format and that structure. And I think the last few years have shown us a wide variety of different structures and formalities as well. But as I've already shared, some information is shared in advance of the day. So the schedule, the rubric that they're going to be using, often filling out on the day of when they're judging and going around and communicating with the youth, talking to our future scientists about their projects and engaging in that space. And then there's often a day of or day before session training, which is anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes. And in terms of what you should generally include in that judge training, you're going to want to provide information about how to give effective feedback. And so recognizing, that there are many different models for providing feedback, but that even in a project that maybe has a lot of areas for growing in, it's still really important for that student to find something that was done well, even if it's the idea of the project that this is, innovative or neat, or I'm excited to see how this can be expanded, in the future. So really again, reminding judges about that ethos, reminding judges about ways to provide, constructive feedback with aspects of, notes of commendation and what's working really well in their projects. Judges can often benefit as well from some notes or prompts or sentence stems of ways in which to ask some probing questions and to continue that conversation with the students. Depending on your region, your demographic for your judges is going to be a little bit different. But if you're getting a lot of, retired faculty members or retired scientists or current faculty or scientists, they sometimes forget what a fifth grader is doing and how a fifth grader is thinking in that sense. And so, really reminding judges that the groups that they're engaging with or that the youth that they're supporting, that there's certain ways in which we can have a more fruitful conversation and that we're not here to scare them. We're not here to harm the students or turn them away from science. We want to ask those thoughtful, thought-provoking questions and kind of dig into well, why are there no error bars on your graphical representation? Have you heard of error bars? What do error bars do? But ways in which you can continue that conversation. And then considerations around the environment. So recognizing that it's generally not good practice to be standing above the student. That power dynamic and differential can cause the student to get a little bit anxious and nervous and things like that. So, have chairs or take a seat on a bench or something. Try to, meet the student at their level, to, again, engage in a conversation. It's not a scary, they're not trying to get a job. It's not a standardized exam or anything. It's a conversation, to interview and to chat about their project, their rationale, the scientific method. What kind of brought them to that STEM fair. And then last but not least, how to read and use the judging rubric. So this is something that we often had a lot of great feedback on from judges, and we get great feedback every year, and we always appreciate that. But just, what does the judging rubric mean? What do the different criteria correspond to? How do you use this when you're actively engaging in the conversation with the student? And so, what does, the criteria associated with, experimental design or, scientific method, what does that actually mean, and how could that look like in different spaces? And so having a chance to provide a couple of examples, to judges can be helpful in that as well. There are numerous resources that are available to support you as you're preparing for judge training. So there will be a sample video, that has been previously created, and handout, by the Science Fair Foundation for BC, and that will be put on that website as well. But you're also welcome to connect with me, as kind of I'm like the judging person, I guess, with the SFFBC. So you can connect with me at jerry@sciencefairs.ca, for any of your kind of general judging questions, or, can you review this, or do you have any thoughts on this? Happy to support and provide feedback and assist in that capacity as well. And then finally, actively engaging with those interviews. So thinking about the fact, how are we going to organize and schedule and plan for what the judges are doing during the STEM fair. So scheduling interviews can be a little bit of a game like Tetris, where you have many different submissions and many different judges with different requirements for schedules and availability and how many projects they're willing to judge and all of these different pieces. And so, we have some templates and resources that we'll be sharing as well on that same page to help you with that. But of course, it's doing your best to accommodate everyone's availability and schedule, and keeping in mind the number of sessions that they're willing to conduct. Some might only be available for, two, and others can do 10. And so recognizing, trying to be aware of that. And that might be something that you want to ask your judges in advance, because it's easier to have that information and plan accordingly and not go back and be like, oh, this is too many for me. I can't do this, if we didn't ask for that information, ahead of time. In terms of the length of the interviews, generally they're about 30 minutes, in terms of bucketing, and this can make it really easy for planning and thinking about how to organize, how many judges you need for an individual project in different spaces. But often the interview itself is maybe 15 to 20 minutes, and then the final remaining time is there for the judge to actually fill out the rubric, while that information is fresh, while that conversation is still fresh, and to actually have a space to just quietly think, and apply it to that rubric to get that final score before you move into your judging deliberations. And then a key question and a key point when we think about judging and organizing how many judges for a project is, how many should there be? At least three. You definitely want to have at least a tiebreaker, in terms of that number of conversations, but more is better. If you can get 4 or 5 per project, that is fantastic. But the kind of bare minimum is three. Again, if you don't have a lot of judge volunteers, that are able to contribute, then you're going to work with the resources that you have available to you. But that is, three is the minimum. 4 or 5 are kind of that sweet spot, in terms of that. And again, it's just more opportunities for the students to have a chance to talk with somebody, to have interesting questions develop, and to just see other people's perspectives on their project in different spaces. So, it's just a chance for us to support, not just professionally the students, but also just scientifically, and engaging. And, you know, judges are going to come from different backgrounds and different experiences, and having that chance to interact with a diverse number of the community is a really beautiful aspect, and that social connection for the students as well. So that kind of sums up and pulls together our whole, judging part two, the training and the interview pieces. And so I'm going to drop that screen share and open it up to what questions you might have.
if there are any questions. I know most people here are quite experienced in science fairs, so.
But I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Mhm.
When I first started up here in Prince George, they were using pod judging, where the person would engage with 6 students, and the 6 students, each of the students would present to all the other students. We got rid of that years ago, but more recently, the judging people handling judging went to two-person teams. So students only get judged once, but by a team of 2 people. Is anybody else doing that? Please say, I hope everybody says no, because that will give me a perfectly justifiable reason for throwing it out. But anybody else using a team judging approach and using 2 people at a time?
We did during COVID, but normally we just assign one judge at a particular time.
Yeah, I mean, there's some. So what's been happening is the students will get judged once by a team of 2. So you get judged at 9 o'clock in the morning for half an hour, and then the rest of the day you never get judged again, which means that students sort of get rambunctious, for lack of a better way of putting it, because they're not having to watch for judges or anything like that. They're not sort of having to pay attention to their project anymore. They're done. Whereas the kid who doesn't get judged until 12:30 has been sitting there for 3 hours, anxiously, nervously waiting for the judge to finally show up. I'd prefer to have a system where, as you said, you had 3 judgings, and one was say from 9 to 9:30, the other was from 10:30 to 11, and then there was one from 11:30 to 12, sort of thing. And then you're gauging the student over a longer period of time. But I just was curious if anybody else, because this was something that, as it was reported to me by Angela, oh, this is what Science Fair Foundation is saying, that you have to go to team models.
We, first of all, it's hard enough to get enough judges to even put into pairs. That's one of our big problems that we have. But I think individual judges, sometimes they may team up and they can do that on their own accord. But I think the important thing about it is you could have more multiple judges judging a single project with single ones as opposed to a pair of judges.
Mhm.
And your judging seems to be very long, so that could break up the day for the kid.
I have a question about sort of the structure. If the judging part of your fair is, say, an hour and a half or 2 hours, and you have your fleet of judges, do you schedule judges to be at a certain project at a certain time, or do they generally just go and mill about and they hit the projects they need to hit?
They have the list and then they just
Yeah.
go through it. Yeah.
Okay.
We used to actually set times.
Okay.
And we did that, and it worked really well. Parents really loved it because they knew, that their kid had to be at their stations, from 9:30 to 10, and then they were free for an hour, and they'd all go out to McDonald's and come back with their, I mean, having actual time slots. So, 9 to 9:30, 9:30, 10, 10:30, and stuff, and saying you'll be judged in this time slot. Really, there were a lot of people who really appreciated that. And then there were the occasional ones who wanted to take their kids off to play volleyball, and they really were annoyed because their kid wasn't being judged till 11:30, and they had to be at volleyball at 10:30, and but
Can't please everybody.
oh God, no.
Katrina?
So one of the things that we do at our regional fair is we do try to have some activities that the students can do while they're waiting, that aren't really loud activities, but something that they can, like circuits or magnets or different things that they could go and do while they're waiting. So we kind of have we kind of kind of assign judges to particular grade groupings, and then they're responsible for that grade grouping. So what I do is kind of make sure that, okay, I know the grade 5s are coming up, but they're over at the activity table. I'll say, okay, grade 5s, you got to head back. It's almost your time. So you need to be sitting there quietly waiting. The judges will be with you shortly. And so that kind of works for us. Now, mind you, we're a smaller fair, like we're around 100, 120 projects, but we do find the activity tables do help that. Plus too, in my little package I send out to the school, I encourage them to send kids with books or art, notebooks to draw or doodle. Like, think of what can you do to kind of entertain yourself, because we usually go judging from about 9 to 11 for us. We usually kind of cover the kind of, I call that like our first round. Sometimes the judges have to go back for a second round, to ask more questions. Okay, these two projects are really close and we got to figure it out. Or sometimes they'll ask for another group of judges, hey, can we get your opinion? So sometimes kids will have 2 or 3, visits with some judges, but usually in ours, we tend to have them in groups of 2 for us. But we have lots of groups of 2, so that we can always pull in another group if needed. So that's kind of what we do.